One night, as Annie cooked dinner, Jesse exploded. "I can't do this, Annie!" he shouted, slamming his fist on the counter. "I can barely take care of myself. How am I supposed to take care of a kid?"
How it started.
The small town of Maple Ridge, Ohio, was the kind of place where dreams went to die. The factory had shut down years ago, and with it went most of the jobs. The only constant was the rain, which seemed to cling to everything, including Annie Parker's hopes. At 19, Annie worked the morning shift at Dale's Diner, a greasy little spot at the edge of town. Every day felt the same, pouring coffee for regulars, dodging her sleazy manager, and staring at the cracked tiles on the floor, wondering if life would ever change. But that day was different. The bell over the door jingled, and in walked Jesse Brooks. He was soaked to the bone, his leather jacket dripping water onto the floor. He was tall and wiry, with messy black hair and a grin that lit up the dreary diner. "You got anything that's warm and cheap?" he asked, shaking rain from his hair. Annie smirked, handing him a cup of coffee. "Cheapest thing we've got is this, but it's not warm. It's hot." Their eyes met, and Annie felt something stir. Jesse started coming to the diner every day. At first it was just for coffee, but soon he and Annie were talking for hours. He told her about working as a mechanic at a failing garage, how he'd dropped out of high school to take care of his younger siblings after their dad left. Annie shared her dreams of becoming an artist, dreams that had been put on hold after her mom's illness drained their savings. One evening, after her shift, Jesse was waiting outside. "You want to take a walk?" he asked. It was drizzling, but Annie didn't care. They wandered through the empty streets, talking about everything and nothing. At one point, Jesse stopped, pulling off his jacket to drape it over her shoulders. "You don't have to do that," Annie protested. "I know," he said softly, "but I want to." Under the faint glow of a street lamp, he kissed her for the first time. It was tender, tentative, and it left Annie breathless. Their relationship grew quickly. Jesse would sneak her flowers he picked from the side of the road, and Annie would bring him homemade sandwiches during his lunch break. They talked about leaving Maple Ridge together, building a better life somewhere far away. One night, as they lay on the hood of Jesse's beat-up truck, staring at the stars, he turned to her. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Annie," he said. "I'm going to give you the life you deserve." I promise Annie believed him. That summer, their passion deepened. On a humid July night, in the cramped room Jesse rented above the garage, they made love for the first time. It was messy and unpolished, but it felt right. For Annie, it was more than just a physical connection. It was a vow. But 2 months later, Annie's world shifted. Her period was late. A cheap drugstore test confirmed her fears. Sitting across from Jesse in his truck, she handed him the test. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. Jesse stared at it, his face unreadable. "Are you sure?" Annie nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "I don't know what to do, Jesse." For a moment, he reached for her hand. "We'll figure it out," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The pressure of impending fatherhood began to weigh on Jesse. He started working longer hours, often coming home late and exhausted. Annie noticed him withdrawing, his once reassuring words now tinged with doubt. One night, as Annie cooked dinner, Jesse exploded. "I can't do this, Annie!" he shouted, slamming his fist on the counter. "I can barely take care of myself. How am I supposed to take care of a kid?" Annie tried to calm him, but deep down, she was scared too. A week later, Annie came home to an empty apartment. Jesse's clothes were gone, and on the kitchen table was a hastily scrawled note. "I'm sorry, I can't do this. Please forgive me." Annie sank to the floor, clutching the note, her sobs echoing through the tiny space. Annie gave birth to a boy she named Liam. He had Jesse's dark eyes and stubborn jawline. Raising him alone was a constant battle. Annie worked double shifts at the diner, often bringing Liam with her because she couldn't afford childcare. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep, overwhelmed by exhaustion and loneliness. But every time Liam smiled at her, she found the strength to keep going, determined to give her son a better life. Annie started taking online art classes during his naps. She painted at night, pouring her emotions onto the canvas. Years passed, and Annie's determination paid off. She built a portfolio and landed a remote job at a small design firm. From there, she launched her own business, creating custom artwork and designs. By the time Liam was 10, they were living in a modest but comfortable house. Annie had finally achieved the life she had dreamed of, and Liam was thriving. One rainy evening, as Annie prepared dinner, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Jesse standing there. He looked older, his once boyish face now lined with regret. "Annie," he began, his voice shaking. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm here to ask for forgiveness. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I've thought about you and Liam every day since I left. Please, Annie, let me make it right." Annie stared at him, her mind flooded with memories of their love and his betrayal. For a moment, she felt the old ache, the longing for what could have been. But then she remembered the nights she had cried alone, the years of struggle he had abandoned her to face. "You don't get to come back now, Jessie," she said, her voice steady but filled with pain. "Liam doesn't need you, and neither do I." Jesse's shoulders sagged, but he didn't leave. "I'll prove it to you," he said quietly. "I'll prove I've changed." Annie closed the door, leaning against it as tears streamed down her face. She wasn't sure if she had made the right decision. Inside, Liam, now 10, came running into the room. "Who was at the door, Mom?" he asked, his curious eyes lighting up her world. Annie knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Just someone from the past," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You should be asking yourself these questions. Will Jesse truly prove he's changed, or is it too late to repair what he broke? Can Annie protect her hard-earned life and her son's happiness from the man who abandoned them? Will Liam, now old enough to ask questions, want to know the truth about the father he's never met? And as Jesse tries to claw his way back into their lives, will the wounds of the past ever truly heal? Or will they open new scars? If you were Annie, what would you do in such situation? Tell your views in the comment, then subscribe and turn on notification bell to be the first to get notified when episode 2 is out.